Good evening and welcome to Psychiatry Defined's webinar series. This is our first sponsored webinar by JMAC Pharmaceuticals, the maker of Luma TC. And what I hope to share with you this evening is really 30 plus years of my career looking at nutritional support for brain function. And particularly, we're going to focus on prevention of cognitive decline and dementia. And the work that I've been doing in trying to educate clinicians is really based on clinical experience and pretty dramatic research that doesn't always get the press because it's nutraceuticals, it's not pharmaceuticals. So I'm going to take you through a very simple journey of how to look at and treat in a prevention manner cognitive decline. So let's get started. I guess we start with me. For those who don't know me, been practicing 35 years, board certified in child and adult psychiatry. I work as a chief medical officer, inpatient psychiatric and eating disorder facility. I teach at Dartmouth and Tufts, and as the founder of Psychiatry Defined, this education platform for clinicians. So I remember it was high school, and I'm over 60, so it was a few years ago, reading a book by Adele Davis. Anyone remembers that name? She was a nutritionist, and my mother would be reading her books. And I'll just never forget the concept. She was actually talking about B vitamins, but this was one of the quotes that stuck in my brain, and pursued a degree in biology and nutrition in college, and my career has been nutrition and brain function. But what she described that I read in the 60s in her books was, if we think of the brain as only 2% of our body weight, and 2% of our body weight, billions of neurons, trillions of we call synaptic connections. But at any moment in time, the brain is utilizing 20 to 25% of our metabolic energy. I mean, think about that. A quarter of our metabolic energy is our thinking, our feeling, our autonomic nervous system. Everything that's happening in the brain is utilizing a lot of energy. So the line that I'll never forget that really launched my interest is mild nutritional deficiencies has to affect the most metabolically active organs in the body before other physical symptoms, before you get the muscle aches or the fatigue or any other system gets affected. So that's the place that I wanted to start tonight when we talk about cognitive decline. Nutritional deficiencies have to affect the most metabolically active organ in the body, which is the brain. And this we'll go through quickly, but think about it. We've all heard it, and it's frightening to those of us over 40, but there's a new dementia case every 3 seconds in the world. So it's a global crisis. The numbers are staggering, and not just the total numbers, but the rise in rates, 152 million by 2050. So we should be concerned, and we should try to figure this out. And I think hopefully what I'll share with you is we have figured it out, but our pharmaceutical companies and our medical community can't accept what has been quite obvious for many years now. So the search for a cure is this billion-dollar waste of pharmaceutical research. Most drugs were halted or discontinued, but we have a new drug, which I'm not going to go through, but complete controversy besides the $56,000 price tag. Beginning to find out who was meeting in hallways from the FDA with Biogen, etc. But I think the scientists, and I have not reviewed this data, has clearly shown this is unlikely to be of any benefit to patient suffering. So what do we know? We know, and we've known this for many years, and now the neurological community and the psychiatric community and every geriatrician will utilize these words that Alzheimer's or dementia is a progression over decades, 20, 30 years. And during that disease progression, there are clear abilities to use words like prevention, which is the theme of this presentation, where we can modify and where the disease progression is symptomatic with significant brain damage, and it's very difficult to treat. So what I want to share with you is a model of prevention and modifying the physiology before dementia and chronic cognitive decline takes place. And, we've been talking about these risk factors for a long time. Everybody picks a topic and obsesses about. It's hard to dissect any one of these because they're all important. Probably the most important one is not here on this slide, which is social connections and community, right? The brain is a social organ. It needs connections. So we know there are risks, but here we're going to talk about this prevention and this modifying factors, and this is our kind of window of opportunity. So let's get going. For anybody who knows my work, for over 30 years now, I've been talking about lithium from micrograms to high doses for bipolar, but lithium has profound implications for many psychiatric illnesses, but for the prevention of Alzheimer's, it appears to me to be indisputable. So here, Journal of Alzheimer's Disease in 2018. So for those who haven't heard it, and we have an 8-hour conference on lithium with a few hours devoted to Alzheimer's prevention, but also other neurodegenerative illnesses. But the history of lithium is fascinating to me. It goes back to the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago, when the Earth, when the universe was formed. There was hydrogen, helium, and small amounts of lithium, and it settled in the Earth's crust. And the Earth was formed about 4.7 billion years ago. So lithium is in the crust. It leached into the water supply, our food supply, and we obtain lithium, which many people believe is essential for human function, even though it's not officially an RDA requirement, mostly from tap water. Lithium is in our soil, it's leached into the water. The vast majority of lithium that we get is from tap water. So the first question we have to ask is, how many people are drinking tap water now versus bottled water, which filters out lithium? And here is kind of a schematic I've used for many years. For those of you who use lithium as a pharmaceutical, 600 to 2,000 milligrams. At high doses, lithium is toxic to the heart, to the brain, and it can be life-threatening at high amounts. And the question that I've been asking in my clinical work is, what is a maintenance dose and what is a deficiency of lithium? And I believe it's somewhere between 1 and 30 milligrams. And again, the history of lithium is fascinating. It was used in the early 1900s, everything from hangovers, the wake up, to mood enhancers. And for those of you who didn't know, 7-Up was a lithiated soft drink, right? And how did they get 7-Up? How did they get the name? Well, the atomic weight of lithium is 6.94. That didn't look good on the bottle, so they rounded up to 7. Up is lift your mood. 7-Up was a lithiated drink to improve your mood in the early 1900s. I think it was around 1930 something when they took out lithium. So The psychiatric research is overwhelming from the 70s, that the amount of lithium in the groundwater, so in the tap water, is associated with psychiatric hospitalizations, dementia, Alzheimer's, violence, aggression, overall mortality, and I think some of the most significant, well-researched, is in suicide prevention. This is lithium levels in the water. And hundreds and hundreds of studies. And again, this is not pharmaceutical lithium. This is microdoses of lithium found in the soil that we get from tap water. So this is not the goal of this presentation, but this research is so overwhelming. It is where I start every talk on lithium. These are a sampling of studies that were done around the globe since the studies were done in the 80s, but published in the 90s, all around the world, that the rates of suicide inversely correlated with lithium levels in tap water. Last one was 2019 in Alabama. Okay, so you have, Texas is a big state. You pick 12 different counties, you look at the lithium in the drinking water, micrograms per liter, and they're able to correlate suicide rates. Lower levels, higher suicide rate. It's not one study, it's 10, 15, hundreds of studies. There's only one negative study that was ever published. And the gentleman who did this study was from England, helped us understand that it was a poorly designed study that he does not stand behind. So then these new studies came out in 2019 and 2020, looking at over 3 million individuals, lithium in the drinking water, dose-dependent related, reduced suicide, mortality. Meiman is the gentleman who did the one negative study, who doesn't stand by it based on how they measured the lithium. And here, he looked at 415 studies. Naturally occurring lithium may have the potential to reduce suicide. And the reason I start with this, one, I think everybody on the planet has to understand this work. But more importantly, as I talk about lithium and the prevention of dementia and Alzheimer's, I need you to understand that microdoses of lithium in the tap water has profound effects on brain function. That's my point here. Microdoses of lithium in our tap water has profound effects on brain function. Research of suicide, these are 2020 studies, millions of individuals consistent. And what we're trying to understand, do some individuals have just a higher genetic need for lithium, just like every other micronutrient? Are those individuals at risk for certainly bipolar, suicide, I believe addiction, and I think we'll see perhaps dementia and Alzheimer's. We clinically found nutritional lithium associated with irritability, aggression, anxiety, substance abuse, depression, road rage, ADHD, bipolar 2 primarily. Okay, so now we're going to talk about this concept of this micronutrient lithium, also used as a medication. Can it reduce the risk of the progression from healthy brain tissue to Alzheimer's? And what we're going to explore is how this happens in the research that's been done on lithium modulating all the biological, physiological changes related to the progression of Alzheimer's and dementia. So one of the fascinating things about lithium is that it's neuroprotective and neuroregenerative. If you take animal studies, this sounds kind of cruel, but if you induce damage to the brain, if you pre-treat with lithium, you'll find less damage. If you add lithium to the damaged neurons, they will heal more quickly. You can do this in a test tube, or you can do this in a live animal. lithium has this incredible potential to repair damaged neurons. And it's just fascinating to see. Again, we have 8 hours of incredible content. If you're interested, we also have courses on lithium, but it is fascinating to me because it has it affects over 100 genes, so it's epigenetic changes. It affects neurotransmitters, and it affects these second messenger systems. It has anti-inflammatory properties, antioxidant properties. I think the most important property for our understanding of its role in the prevention of dementia is probably that little arrow on the bottom there, GSK3. GSK3 is a major enzyme in the brain. All of the targets for pharmaceuticals for dementia and Alzheimer's are trying to find inhibitors of GSK3 because GSK3 can help accumulate the tau protein and the beta amyloid. So if we can decrease GSK3, we can decrease that neurophysiology. And lithium has significant inhibitors of GSK3. So again, we could spend an hour going over the mechanisms. They are fascinating, and we can talk more about them. In terms of neurotransmitters, lithium decreases glutamate and dopamine and increases serotonin and GABA. Again, major mechanisms inhibiting the GSK3, so that will stop the production of tau and beta amyloid. Another mechanism inhibiting this inositol monophosphate, which stimulates the recycling and aggregation of beta amyloid. So the mechanisms of how lithium affects dementia, cognitive decline, Alzheimer's in particular, has been well studied for many, many years. Here's just another schematic of what happens if we inhibit this GSK3 enzyme. Lithium is also significant in stimulating brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. You can't see lithium, here it is. So brain-derived neurotrophic factor, it is a neuropeptide in the brain. It is stimulates neurogenesis. Many people have referred to it as miracle grow for the brain. It helps dendrites grow. It also heals. People with depression have low BDNF. People with dementia have low BDNF. Lithium stimulates both the synthesis and the genes that produce BDNF. Well documented. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's also stimulated by exercise, caloric restriction, some nutrients. Lithium is the most direct with multiple mechanisms. One study looking at lithium for 10 weeks was able to restore BDNF levels and improve cognitive scores. Lithium stimulates BDNF. Here's just some of the 50 genes. It was one of the talks in the lithium conference was fascinating on lithium's role for cancer prevention. Again, based on the second messenger system and the multiple anti-inflammatory mechanisms. Okay, let's get to the topic. So where did we begin to start thinking of lithium? Well, with bipolar patients. Bipolar patients taking lithium, pharmaceutical dose of lithium, had much lower rates of Alzheimer's, and pretty dramatic. Now, if we take bipolar patients not on lithium, they actually have much higher rates of Alzheimer's. Okay, bipolar patients not on lithium, higher rates of Alzheimer's. If those individuals here were taking lithium, which usually, I'll show you in a bit, lithium for up to a year, look at the prevalence of Alzheimer's, 5% versus 33%. We have other studies. There was 2 Denmark studies, 21,000 individuals looking at charts. those individuals that took pharmaceutical dose of lithium decreased levels of dementia and Alzheimer's. Again, we've had these studies for almost 20 years. Lithium, pharmaceutical lithium, low rates of dementia. Here's another study. Again, long-term use is about a year. Individuals that took lithium for less than a year did not have the significant changes. And when we talk about prevention, we're going to talk about these aren't 8-week trials, and the effects of the research I'm going to share with you are 1, 2, and up to 4 years. Anyways, pharmaceutical lithium, up to a year, reduced dementia risk by 23%. Okay, so people got excited, and then, I don't know, maybe just to get published, but some of these pretty ridiculous studies started coming out. I mean, think about our Alzheimer's brain that we've seen pictures of for 30 years that are shriveled and low volume, and people started looking at lithium with patients with Alzheimer's disease. Only 8 patients completed the study in 2008. No benefits were seen. And a bit late to do a study. Here's just a visual image. I don't think a micronutrient like lithium, and we've seen any pharmaceutical on the planet, no matter how many billions, can make a difference in the severe brain atrophy of advanced Alzheimer's disease. So back to our original model, prevention is key. The only thing I just threw in here is the only thing that has been shown is lithium being used, low-dose lithium, for agitation with end-stage Alzheimer's disease. So this was a pilot study, low doses, 150, mostly 300, low blood levels, helped with the aggression associated with Alzheimer's, and they have now a funded study looking at this. Anyway, so then researchers started getting a little more careful in their thinking and trying to look at this model of prevention, and we started seeing some results. The first well-done study, double-blind, placebo-controlled, by Nunes in 2013, published in Alzheimer's Research, 0.3 milligrams, 300 micrograms. Again, not, some of the early studies were 8 weeks. This is 15 months, once a day. Lithium therapy demonstrated stable cognitive performance, while those who did not take lithium, progressive decline. Alzheimer's symptoms improved here at 3 months, and no side effects. Again, the rationale for the study was the higher doses in the elderly, even though blood levels were low, could create side effects. So the first study, 2013, well done. Lithium was effective at 300 micrograms. And then a more comprehensive study done in Brazil by Florenza's group, and this was really fascinating. These are a mild cognitive impairment, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial, 61 healthy adults. They used a blood level. They did between 0.25 and 0.5, so they didn't have a dose. Lithium carbonate was used. They started everybody at 150 milligrams and titrated up if they needed higher amounts of lithium. Placebo-controlled trial, originally double-blinded for 2 years. Then they followed for another 2 years, single-blinded, to monitor patients. So we have a 4-year study published in the British Journal of Psychiatry looking at low-dose lithium in mild cognitive impairment. And it was pretty dramatic in a really well-done study. And I have to say this a lot in both our pharmaceutical and nutraceutical world. There was no conflict of interest. There was no funding with any results that would have helped anybody. This was a generic lithium carbonate. So primary outcome variables, clinical rating scales and assessment scales and neuropsych testing. And they also did cerebrospinal fluid concentrations of beta amyloid and tau. So lithium treated group better performance on tests of memory and attention at 24 months. And this increase of amyloid at 36 months, which was pretty dramatic. And the discussion, the argument is that by the amyloid in the CSF, that it was coming out of the brain after that 2 to 3 year period. So the conclusion, long-term lithium attenuates cognitive and functional decline and memory impaired mild cognitive impairment. It modifies disease-related CF biomarkers. And again, one of many studies looking at lithium as that disease-modifying property in this long progression of cognitive decline related to dementia. Here's his conclusion, was associated better performance on memory and attention tests after 2 years, and then the beta amyloid coming out after 3 years. This is not an 8-week study. This is not a 1-year study. This was, they followed people up to 4 years. It gets better. These are some of the Danish studies. Again, back to this drinking water. The literature is indisputable for suicide prevention. And now we have this Danish study, I guess 73,000 individuals with dementia and 733 controls, and pretty significant higher level of lithium, decreased incidence of dementia. So again, here we're talking about microdoses in drinking water, not pharmaceutical doses, not dosages that would cause side effects. Pretty dramatic summary, as lithium levels go up, decrease new dementia cases. So when this was, slide was done a couple of years ago, so before the new approval, if we look at all the analysis of the drugs that are approved with minimal improvement, I have not seen any and stopped using all of these. But look at lithium, okay, in terms of randomized controlled trials, was as effective as our approved drugs for dementia and Alzheimer's. Right, in terms of the ability to inhibit the progression of cognitive decline. Okay, let's move on. We got a lot to talk about. Billions of dollars, no drug has come close to lithium. Are we talking about it? No. Why? There's not a financial incentive for any pharmaceutical company. This is an article from James Phelps. He's an academic, a psychiatrist, incredible credentials, who gave our presentation at our lithium conference and discussed lithium for Alzheimer's prevention. Why are we waiting? I can share with you that he is not a integrative functional psychiatrist like myself and the work that we teach, but he takes lithium every day, 150 milligrams, based on his understanding of the prevention of Alzheimer's disease. But I do need to share with you 150 milligrams of lithium carbonate. There's only about 28 milligrams of elemental lithium. And I just need you to go back and remember the suicide studies had microdosages. The Nunez study had 300 micrograms. The tap water studies, low dose lithium can be effective. Okay, happy to take questions in the Q&A, but I want to move on. I hope if you haven't digested the literature on lithium, please read the literature. The second, which is even simpler, model of prevention that I want to share with you is being able to evaluate homocysteine and treat elevations of homocysteine. Homocysteine is an amino acid. It's a byproduct of the folate cycle. It is excreted either through remethylation or transsulfuration. The accumulation of homocysteine is toxic. It's toxic to the brain, to the heart. New study came out in terms of erectile dysfunction, but we have research, most of it cardiovascular and neuropsychiatric. Elevated homocysteine is a significant risk factor. The research has been around for many, many years. And Alzheimer's and dementia. The first studies, this is in the New England Journal of Medicine, was written in 2002. It was just simple. A plasma homocysteine, a simple blood test, is a risk factor for dementia and Alzheimer's. This is frightening, 2002. You know, you're not going to get a more reputable journal, and it was indisputable, no controversy. Nobody continued to research or look at it. Increased homocysteine, a strong independent risk factor for the development of dementia and Alzheimer's disease in 2002. I emphasize the word strong. And then in 2018, this was called an international consensus statement published in the Journal of Alzheimer's. Experts from around the globe looked at all the research and came up with the same conclusion. Elevated plasma homocysteine is a modifiable risk factor for cognitive decline, dementia, and Alzheimer's disease. And again, many integrative functional psychiatrists do look at homocysteine levels, but our traditional Alzheimer's treatment model is not. It is incredibly simple. We lower homocysteine with B vitamins, B6, B12, folate. And if we lower homocysteine, we can stop brain atrophy and slow cognitive decline. It is just simple and dramatic. And what was really very surprising to me, because I've been testing homocysteine for many, many years, hospital level, outpatient, that the moderately raised levels, like over 11, was associated with cognitive decline. So I would say most males I'm testing are 11 or 12. And then we get patients admitted to the hospital with schizophrenia and severe suicidal ideation that might have 20, 30, 40. And so it was not high levels that they were looking at, moderately raised levels, so over 11 related to cognitive decline. Why would homocysteine levels rise? Alcohol, creatinine, blood pressure, folate levels being low, MTHFR variants, low B12, B6, age, male gender. Lots of reasons. We're going to go through some of these quickly. Folate. We know folic acid in our multivitamins is synthetic. It's not found in the human body. Well, it's found in the human body now because we fortify our foods, but it's not found in nature. We convert folate in our vegetables to L-methylfolate, which crosses the blood-brain barrier and is the cofactor in the synthesis of all major neurotransmitters. There are genetic variants of the MTHFR gene that can affect the conversion of folate to L-methylfolate. And we have decent research just looking at giving folate here. Again, not mega doses here, 1.25 milligrams per day, 6 months with mitigating Alzheimer's disease. This was looking at inflammation and folate and did not specifically measure homocysteine levels. But folate, again, important for the methylation of all the major neurotransmitters, a DNA repair, and lowering homocysteine. It affects many aspects of brain function. There's dietary, genetic, and drug-induced paths to deficiencies of folate. B12, to me, I've used the term, it's the single greatest tragedy of modern medicine many times, because another simple, preventable, treatable deficiency that has major implications across all psychiatric illness, anxiety, depression, but for our purposes here tonight, cognitive decline. B12 is critical for neurotransmission, energy metabolism, and neuroprotection. There's not as many studies as we'd like, but enough studies and clinical experience that low B12 is associated with memory decline and brain volume. Lower B12, smallest brain, lower test scores on reasoning and memory. And we know if we provide B vitamins, we can slow the atrophy. And again, one study looking at giving the B6, B12, and folate, 133 people over 70, for 2 years, mild cognitive impairment, stop memory decline, again, in particular those with high homocysteine. This was an Indian journal, and I just put it in because the quote was important to me, looking at B12 deficiency in these major neuropsychiatric illnesses. Prevention, early detection, and the management of this reversible vitamin B12 deficiency state is of profound importance. Yesterday, I received an email from one of the medical staff that work with me at that hospital that I run, and had a patient with a B12 level of 185. And most people believe that B12 under 500 are considered deficient. The levels of serum B12 do not correlate with levels in the brain. So anybody with cognitive decline, we would treat with B12 regardless of blood levels, because it does not reflect what's in the CSF in the brain. We have lots of research supporting that. So this patient at 181 discharged from our hospital, and the PCP told the patient to ignore that level. Major psychiatric illness, the B12 180, that is what I mean by the single greatest tragedy in modern medicine, because that individual B12 level is profoundly deficient, and a simple treatment could prevent further psychiatric deterioration in that individual. Anyways, at least Quest Labs changed the normal. They started increasing the values between 200 and 400 might have neuropsychiatric implications. So please check homocysteine, check B12, and treat it. So N-acetylcysteine, it's getting a lot of press now because the FDA is trying to take it off the market. We've been using it as a supplement for many, many years, besides using it as a major treatment modality for Tylenol poisoning. Some of the best academic research we have in the field of psychiatry is NAC across multiple major psychiatric illness. But there was very good research looking at NAC and dementia. NAC supports the levels of glutathione, the major antioxidant in the brain. So NAC is the precursor. And we have low levels associated with poor cognitive function and Alzheimer's. And we know now our traditional colleagues are able to use words like oxidative stress and DNA damage and inflammation. And we know that glutathione is the major anti-inflammatory molecule in the brain. Low levels of NAC associated with cognitive decline in Alzheimer's leading to These are just some of the mechanisms. I'm going to move quickly. NAC is easy to understand. The literature is quite extensive, and its ability to support glutathione appears to be the most dramatic, well-studied mechanism. I'll go through these quickly. The dosages of N-acetylcysteine have been, anywhere from 300 to 3,000. N-acetylcysteine does not work quickly. It's a very slow process. So like the lithium we talked about, you need to provide N-acetylcysteine over this 12 to 15 month period. You need to think about it as a disease modifying property, not as a aggressive treatment. Even though the research in multiple psychiatric illnesses, from PTSD to bipolar to depression to drug detox, typically the studies are 8 to 12 weeks. But for dementia, we're looking at 12 to 15 months. So the last nutraceutical that I want to talk about is curcumin. The research is really staggering and overwhelming. 1,300 studies, health benefits from cancer cell proliferation to anti-inflammatory. In terms of dementia and Alzheimer's, again, curcumin, turmeric is mostly used in India, and India has lowest incidence of Alzheimer's in the world. The mechanisms, like lithium, is really fascinating. Curcumin is considered a polyphenol and multiple kind of neurophysiological properties. Probably many more that we don't know about, but certainly enhancement of BDNF, increasing neurotransmitters, modulating neurotransmitters, a CB1 antagonist, and inhibiting monoamine oxidase to keep catecholamines in the synapse longer. In terms of Alzheimer's, again, Journal of Alzheimer's in 2017. This is not new information. We have it. Again, all the major neurophysiological properties we think about with dementia and Alzheimer's can be attenuated and affected by curcumin. And here's the study. Curcumin is not well absorbed, so we're always looking for better absorption. And over the past 10 or 20 years, multiple pharmaceutical companies have been wrapping the curcumin in fat. And so there's some products out there better than just buying curcumin in the store. But one from a Japanese company, Curcumin, is a highly absorbable form of curcumin. So psychiatrist at UCLA with a number of authors did a double-blind placebo-controlled trial just using curcumin. And these were 40 subjects, 51 to 84. They took this curcumin, 90 milligrams twice a day. Again, it wasn't 3 months, it wasn't 12 months, it was 18 months. They were looking at neuropsych changes as well as some PET scans, the accumulation of beta amyloid and tau. They were able to show after 18 months reductions in beta amyloid and tau in the areas of the brain mostly associated with memory. And here's the summary, and also some neuropsych outcomes looking at memory and attention that showed benefit. Again, this was just using one supplement that they're currently. And, I rushed through major nutrients that I've been looking at for 30 plus years. But as I showed you, there are multiple factors, and we're aware of that. But certainly we can affect diet, processed foods associated with risk, and then all the other nutrients that we didn't talk about. One of the earlier books I wrote was on Alzheimer's prevention. And besides the lithium and the homocysteine, the curcumin, and the NAC, the vitamin D literature is just as dramatic. A simple blood test and major predictor of dementia and Alzheimer's, again, not traditionally done. So it's a very manageable list of tests. And again, Luma sponsored this, and Luma TC is the combination of the supplements that we discuss. And it's important that it has the dosages of curcumin used in the small study. It has lithium orotate, which in our conference, we actually had the first toxicology study that was ever presented, looking at the safety of lithium orotate. A lot of colleagues on the internet can talk about kidney damage and liver damage, which is completely unfounded. Here you have the NAC, the L-methylfolate, the B12, and the B6. Also important, dye-free. Some of the newer supplements coming out have multicolors, and need to be careful. You know, we're all bombarded, whether it's a reputable supplement company or newsletter, but everybody's selling something, and the stuff on TV now for brain enhancement, whether it's a 3 a.m. infomercial or a full-page ad, you know, in People magazine, where colleagues, you know, mine are being quoted as saying, you know, that you'll notice a difference in a week or a day, and testimonials, my brain improved, and which is both absurd and sad to see. And as a medical food, Luma had to provide to the FDA the research. I just shared a few studies, but the hundreds of articles substantiating the claims that you can make as a medical food, not as a nutritional supplement. So non-prescription, medical food, having the combination of the B vitamins, NAC, curcumin, and lithium, promoting the things we talked about, neurogenesis, neurorestoration. And again, it's not a 8-week supplement. In my experience, as well as the work that we've been doing, we're talking about 12 to 18 months. So prevention, prevention, prevention. That's all I can share with you, is understanding Alzheimer's disease as a disease that takes 10, 20, 30 years of changes that occur in the brain. And the buzzwords are clear: inflammation. They know about plaques and tangles and oxidative stress. And the supplements I described with more research on the Luma TC website can synergistically address these pathologies. So, you know, my hero, Abraham Hoffer, who wrote about high-dose B3 and schizophrenia, presented double-blind placebo-controlled trials. The APA told him that he was just selling vitamins, even though he had no financial interest. No amount of evidence will persuade someone who is not listening. Just think of the billions of dollars in pharmaceuticals for Alzheimer's that have been thrown away, and the billions of dollars that are still being generated for that magic drug. So I talked about this prevention model, nourishing the brain, but I shared with you the social connections, the sense of community, sense of family, also been shown to be just as important for brain health. That's the nurturing the mind. These are books where we're going to these in more detail. A lithium book, I also mentioned the lithium conference and the Alzheimer's book. And just to share a little bit about Psychiatry Refined, if you're not familiar, it's an educational platform for clinicians trying to understand how we can get information of and sifting through the media hype, the marketing hype, the information overload at conferences, So we've broken it down to courses, many books, and then for those interested into a 2-year fellowship on functional integrative medicine for mental health. We have monthly webinars, as we did this evening, and we have conferences. We've had 4 this year. This is our last conferences, Child and Adolescent Psychiatry to find physician experts from around the country, helping clinicians to see that there might be some alternative to a pure psychopharm model. So thank you. Be happy to take some questions. Not going to be able to answer them all, but I will try. Does filtered water contain lithium? You know, it depends on the filter, but the vast majority probably don't. Particularly, I've had people with the reverse osmosis used in their home for many years, and that would take out lithium, and they all were found to be lithium deficient. Now, I've been looking at lithium levels in hair samples for over 30 years, and where I'd probably get 20% in a psychiatric practice. When I started, I'm probably getting closer to 50% undetectable lithium in a hair sample. 7-Up does not contain lithium. I wish it did, but it does not. It was taken out in the 30s. You know, start taking lithium. You know, I'm a believer of low dosages, you know, 1 to 2 milligrams. And then as we get in risk factor territory over 40, going up to the 5 milligram dose. And absolutely, if you have risk factors, and I think at the LumaTC website, there's a great schematic about risk factors, but MTHFR variants, ApoE4 variant, absolutely, I would be looking at all the lifestyle and nutritional factors, and I would be taking lithium at a much earlier age. Yes, you can get your water tested for lithium levels. Doctors Data does it. A lot of any lab would do it. Well, it's not filtered out of all the water, but what is really important to understand is that your tap water might have very little lithium, if any. My tap water, based on the water in the soil that I'm drinking from, is very different. So the lithium varies. And it's fascinating because we know the lithium in the water affects suicide rates and major psychiatric illness. It is just dramatic. I can't stress how dramatic the research is. So yes, you do not know how much lithium is in the water. Yes, I test every patient that I've seen, and the work that we teach is looking at lithium levels. Has to be a hair sample. Nobody should have a blood level of lithium if you don't take pharmaceutical lithium. You know, for me, microdose lithium, I would say, is 150 milligrams of lithium carbonate or below. So I use, you know, 1 to 2 milligram in children for irritability and anger. I also use 5 milligrams to 10 milligrams of orotate in terms of prevention of cognitive decline. Absolutely, exercise both stimulates a BDNF and clearly supports cognitive decline. We don't have a great comparison. Exercise does stimulate BDNF. The lithium is really dramatic in stimulating the genes to produce more BDNF. Someone has elevated homocysteine, a methylated B12 folate to be too excitatory. Again, you have to lower the homocysteine. That is your goal. And you're going to take the lowest doses of B12, B6, and folate that you would need to not get that overstimulation. It could be the methylated B12, Oftentimes it's dose related. Oftentimes it's actually not related to the methylation, even though that's out there on the internet. It is related to other functional medicine markers that we look for. But you have to lower the homocysteine. Trimethylglycine also can lower homocysteine. Now, if someone has elevated homocysteine, next step is find out why. Now, if it's elevated 12 to 15, given the combination of B6, B12, folate is fine. But you're going to find one individual that's going to have the TT variant. You're going to find the next individual that's going to have a B12 of 100, and the next individual might have low B6 due to elevations of cryptopyrrole. So those are three different reasons why homocysteine is elevated, and the treatment would be different. Again, most individuals giving B6, B12, and folate together will bring down homocysteine. I don't know if anyone's looking at lithium for cognitive deficits due to COVID and long haulers. We're putting on next year's conference, a post-COVID cognitive thing, and absolutely, if you ask me, without any research supported, we have people have been recommending low-dose lithium for Lyme for many, many years. It is anti-inflammatory, it is antioxidant in the brain, and hundreds of mechanisms that would make me think that low-dose lithium could be considered for long haulers. B complex with B6, I know it's not usually a problem at all. B6 under 100 milligrams usually fine. Some people do notice neurological side effects to too high a dose of B6. Again, it's usually over 100. Serum folate, really difficult to assess. In the genetics conference that we did, I spent an hour talking about folate and blood tests. Most of the folate in our serum is folic acid, synthetic from processed food where it's added. It's a law. All the flour has supplemented with folic acid. So blood levels are not accurate anymore because what you're measuring in the serum is going to be all the forms of folic acid. So folic acid, folate, folinic acid. So low serum levels are meaningful. High serum levels, which we see a lot, is meaningless. I've been looking at renal function and low-dose lithium for 30 plus years. If there are elevations of kidney function, then absolutely work with your physician and check renal function. But for normal kidney function, I've seen no changes. I've had individuals with chronic renal disease who had bipolar illness who had to take a microdose of lithium and followed it for many years with no changes in kidney function or creatinine. But I would not do it on my own without being monitored by the physician. Yes, serum B12 do not reflect CSF levels. So they did a study. They did spinal taps on individuals with cognitive decline, normal serum levels, 5, 6, 7, 900. B12, normal. They did a spinal tap. The cerebral spinal fluid had 0 B12 in the CSF. You need lithium to support B12 transport. That is one of my theories. There's also many other reasons why B12 would not be accessed the blood-brain barrier due to inflammation and other micronutrient deficiencies like zinc. I would treat anybody with cognitive decline with B12 injections, and I've seen pretty dramatic results. Post-severe concussion, well, we have animal studies, and we have lots of animal studies. And again, in the lithium conference, I had a researcher from NIMH, 40 years, academic researcher who studies traumatic brain injury and lithium. So yes, we do have data, traumatic brain injury and lithium. That's in the conference website. Dosage of B6, B12, really can't pick dosages. For most individuals, we're talking about prevention, then the lumatic would be adequate. If you're testing for B12 and it's low, under 500, then you might want to replete with B12 higher doses for 1 to 3 months. The dosage as for prevention is, my opinion, for younger individuals, it's 2 to 3 milligrams, 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, depending on age. That's just kind of 2 milligrams is kind of my minimum, and then it goes 5 to 10. This research to support it. We had the one study looking at 300 micrograms, the other study looking at 150 milligrams. So, not a lot of research supporting a dose. I've been using the 5 milligrams for just many years. A liposomal glutathione versus NAC. Well, let's put it this way: if you Google NAC and look at the academic research, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of articles from many people that I know are nutrition skeptics, right? Academic researchers across the globe studying NAC, and it works. I'm not sure you're going to find that liposomal glutathione research, and I'm not sure we can compare. I certainly, I've seen side effects to IV glutathione in people that were mold toxic. So we know it works, but sometimes it can work too good. And liposomal glutathione clearly is better absorption. It's just really hard to say if one is better than the other. Patients taking 5 milligrams BID lithium shows excess lithium. Is that a problem? Well, anybody that takes 10 milligrams of lithium orotate, or anybody that takes lithium carbonate is going to have elevations of lithium in the hair. Just like you're going to get a blood level. So I would be worried about accumulation of lithium. I'd be more concerned about the blood levels, not hair test levels. Lithium can be taken with or without food. The only thing that I say, not because it's research, but you don't want to take it with magnesium. It kind of competes with magnesium, looks like magnesium. So I just don't take magnesium supplements. The Bredesen protocol, well, first of all, someone asked a lot of great questions. I'll answer them backwards. Ketogenic diet, I'm a huge fan. One of our conferences that we're planning for early next year is a neuropsychiatric illness in the ketogenic diet. And I'm certainly I think it's got a little bit of hype on the internet, but yeah, absolutely a fan of the ketogenic diet. The Bredesen protocol, absolutely a fan, well-researched, very expensive, and just the vast majority of patients in this country can't afford the $1,000 workup. And so hence why I picked, some of these more significant factors with much more research behind it. I think Bredesen hasn't really addressed lithium as aggressively as I think he should. And he's starting to market supplements without a lot of research. We'll leave it at that. CDB choline is another great supplement with good research, and absolutely in our lifestyle factors, sleep and sleep deprivation and obstructive sleep apnea. So it's all part of that lifestyle, prevention, modifying risk factors. That's why we have the book. And we'll have an ebook coming out going into some of the research, but this was just a brief summary, but thank you for mentioning those things. What age should you start taking LUMA? Well, I recommend lithium to children, particularly psychiatric kids with irritability and aggression. So we're using LUMA in 8, 9, 10, 12-year-olds with family histories of bipolar illness, with irritability, with aggression. Oftentimes in the young kids, I stop it after 6, 12 months, see how they're doing. Many kids don't do as well, and those are the kids I think just have higher needs. We put them back on lithium. Again, it's in the tap water. Chronic low-dose lithium, I think, is appropriate to take for the rest of your life. Your brain needs it. The dosages we're not clear about. The average I've assessed that people get in their food and water is about 2 milligrams. So that's why I kind of use that 2.5 milligram. If you take half of a pill or the 5 milligram. Yes, unless you have kidney disease, I believe it's safe to take. So I would not, again, the treatment, but for the curcumin studies, the lithium studies, you want to be taking this for years, either in your food or as supplements. Someone asked about after 65. Well, if we're talking about 20 or 30 years, most people, particularly with risk factors, are going to have the neuropathology in a 65-year-old brain. So the question is, why wouldn't you take it earlier? Somebody over 65, if they're not end-stage Alzheimer's, would clearly benefit from these preventative measures. Hopefully you're checking homocysteine, but the preventive nutrients like NAC, lithium, and curcumin will make a dent, and that's where the research is quite clear. I just caution about the end-stage Alzheimer's. My mother's been in a memory unit for X number of years. Should I use lithium? And again, maybe for agitation, but not for the reversal of cognitive decline. How much lithium did 7-Up contain? I don't know. I'm going to look that up. I know it was micrograms. It was tiny dosages. Is orotate better than carbonate? Great question. I'm going to say no. Only to be a little controversial, because so many years, I think the integrative functional people said orotate was better, and there's no research to support that. I've been using both for 35 years and seen incredible results. Just remember, 150 milligrams of lithium carbonate only has 28 milligrams of elemental lithium. Carbonate is higher dosage, and it's a prescription. So if we demonstrated the research that these low dosages have effects on brain function, then for most people, it's easier to get a supplement, and that's the orotate. Statins, well, don't go there, but again, we have courses, and in the book is a chapter on low cholesterol and dementia. I think statins, I won't make a statement around elevated cholesterol and diabetes with elevated cholesterol, but for doctors to provide statins for people with low cholesterol is just, I think, malpractice, because the literature on very low cholesterol and dementia and depression is just overwhelming. I've written about it and talked about it for years. Yeah, these cholesterol levels under 150 is a risk factor for depression and dementia, and strokes, and cancer. I guess I could go on and on. Some of the other herbs, bacopa, yeah, there's decent research, but it's just not as dramatic as the lithium, homocysteine, and curcumin stuff. And the lion's mane, it's just not as dramatic as the supplements I talked about. The question is, MTHFR, take a higher dose of lithium? A great question. I would say clinically, I likely have seen or just done that a lot because of other testing, but I don't think we have research to support that. Yes, lithium can be added to water. There are drops. I don't like the drops. I used them for years because, you know, for parents to count, you're not accurate. I don't like the drops or sprays, so I'm much more comfortable with pills. Can Luba be used to treat anxiety or ADHD? You know, with a functional medicine model, we're looking for risk factors. We're looking for underlying nutritional factors. We're looking for gut dysbiosis. We're looking at a whole host of variables. And yes, for ADHD, I'm going to find low levels of B12 and folate. I'm going to find irritability and lithium and anxiety and ADHD. I actually had a case today of a family with OCD and a child going off to college. And rather than taking the multiple supplements, actually the patient's mother heard about Luma TC, and it just combined the lithium the patient needed, the B12 and the folate, and the NAC that is particularly helpful for anxiety and particularly OCD. The dose might be adjusted. So for some individuals, I might be looking at 2 tabs a day, but titrating up starting with 1. So yes, I mean, I think the model for Luma TC was around cognitive decline, but when we look at the ingredients, multiple things. It doesn't matter when you take lithium, day or night. My recommendation would be to take it during the day. Homocysteine, you want certainly under 10 for women, usually a little lower, under 6. The lithium in the hair samples, you want to be at least 50% of the 50th percentile. Magnesium question, I just meant with lithium because they kind of displace each other. They're molecularly almost identical. So just around absorption. Again, lithium, most of the time, take it in the during the day. If you take it in the evening, you just wouldn't take it at the exact same time. So lithium could be, you know, in the evening 5 to 7 if you're taking magnesium for sleep, right before sleep. And again, not a lot of research to support that. And I have people taking magnesium and lithium together for many, many years without any problems. You would not, you know, I would check a lithium level after 6 months, particularly if someone took over 5 milligrams of lithium orotate, just once to just convince myself and the patient there's no blood level, because typically you would not get a blood level on 5 to 10 milligrams of lithium orotate. If you do, you'd want to just try to understand why. Long-time vegans. Well, I do have a concern about long-time vegans that aren't checking blood levels, particularly zinc and B12, and oftentimes lithium is also low. So testing for vegans, I think, is really critical. Someone asked about irritability and anger issues. Again, that was the focus of my talk in the lithium conference. For kids, I start with 1 and 2 milligrams, titrate up. For adults, depending, I'd start to 2 or 5 milligrams and titrate up. There are times I've got to 10 milligrams of lithium orotate, no difference, went to 150 milligrams of lithium carbonate, and significant purpose. We have an ebook on road rage, where we use lithium in adult males with road rage, lithium orotate, 5 milligrams, like the Luma TC with dramatic results. So for lithium, I wouldn't go by weight. Everyone's different. Again, starting off 2.5 milligrams, 5 milligrams, and titrating up. As you can see, I can talk about lithium for a long time. It's not a 10 milligram brand that I recommend. I would stick with ones, twos, or fives. Okay, I gotta answer some of these. Can low dose lithium help with sugar cravings? That's a good question. I probably would say no. There are so many other things that can. Certainly cutting out carbs, ketogenic diet. We also use glutamine for sugar cravings. We also use amino acid supplements, phenylalanine, chromium. Lithium has not been as dramatic by itself. Great. So for those of you that have risk factors, age, substance abuse, family histories, ApoE gene, it just kind of makes sense that you understand this disease progression model and you understand the factors demonstrated by the research over time. And that's why I think many of us have been there. We read about a new supplement, whether it's Bacopa or CDP choline, and we say, oh, this works, and we take it. And we find the next study, and this works. And then we find that we have 332 supplements in our kitchen table, and we feel like we're going crazy, and it looks a little ridiculous. So, trusting the manufacturing and looking for some combination products can be really cost saving, as well as really a little more kind of supportive. The model of Psychiatry Defined, though, is testing. I don't always recommend just taking a supplement. You want to check the B12 and check the homocysteine, because that's where we can really personalize and target a treatment for that individual. And that's hopefully where psychiatry is heading, to a more personalized treatment model. So I really appreciate you taking the time. We went a little over. Please take a look at the Psychiatry Defined website. There's lots of free webinars, there's courses and material that you can share with colleagues and clinicians. Thanks again. Have a great night.